Hello, this is Mike Cohen. I'm here with Steve Delia, Alice Wootson, and Connie Schwartzman, and we're here to interview Alice Wootson on her poetry and writing career. This is one in a series of interviews that Steve Delia is doing. It's November 19th, 2017, and welcome.
How you doing, Alice?
Okay, so far so good.
I think it's rougher from here.
Okay.
All right, well, we always start at the beginning. When did you start writing poetry?
When I was in 5th grade, my 5th grade teacher, Miss Samalis, had us write a poem. And I wrote a poem. I always did like it, and I wrote a poem then. And I was the kind of child that just wanted to blend into the background, but she made me read it out loud. And she made me read it a second time out loud.
So that meant she liked it.
Yeah.
How about a general interest in reading? Were you a reader besides?
Oh, yeah. And I come from a long line. My mother said her earliest memories were after dinner. She was one of 6 children. They and the parents would sit around, each one reading a separate book, reading their own book. But I've always loved to read. When I had to turn out the light in the bedroom, I'd get on the floor and read from the light coming from the bathroom under the door.
And did you read a lot of poetry then, or were you reading novels or
Everything.
Everything,
Yeah.
We know that, of course, you write the romance novels.
Yes.
Was romance writing something that you started early, or did that come later?
That came later after reading a lot. You know, my sister and I, who's since deceased, but she was also an author, decided, hey, we could write one of these. So I pushed her into it. So her book was published first. And so then she pushed me, and I had a relatively easy time with that first one. I submitted it, and it was picked up by Arabesque. Right now, Arabesque was a publisher that later sold to BET Books, that later sold to Harlequin, and Harlequin's Kimani line. But my first book, Snowbound with Love, was picked up, and it was published in 2000. So it was published after I retired.
Now, how many of these romance novels do you have now?
I have 13 out. An editor and an agent are looking at number 14, and the editor said she's interested in it. But it's a departure. It's historical, set around the Civil War era.
Do the publishers, do they set you up with a contract and expect you to do X amount of books in X amount of time, or do you just do this as you do it?
The first one, they wanted the first one, and they wanted a second one, but it was a long time. They have a book for about a year before it comes out in print. So meanwhile, you've been writing, so you usually have one ready. The second one is ready, and that was Dream Wedding. But then I think an author must have missed a deadline because they asked me to write a Christmas book. And that was kind of like a hurry-up book, rush book. I don't like to rush to write. But that one is Home for Christmas. I was teaching. I'd come home from school and go to my computer and write. And I write now. I don't write from an outline. I write now and until I find myself coming out of the story. But it's like I'm sitting there watching a movie. I'm watching the story unfold as I write it.
Does your romance writing and your poetry, do they collide in any way?
They are not related at all. It's like I have a split personality. Because a lot of my poetry is angry poetry. You know, the Gone with the Wind.
Yes.
Thank God. But something happens to trigger, and a lot of them are emotional, and a lot of them are angry reactions to something that I've seen or read or whatever. While the romance books, I write romance because I want a happy ending. Now, there's some stuff that they go through. There's no fluff there. There's some stuff that they go through, but they do end up with a happy ending.
So what comes more naturally, the poetry or the
Now it's the fiction.
really?
Yeah, it's the fiction. And I have actually the one that Deb is looking at is Hannah's Freedom. And I don't know if you want to hear more about that. But my father's grandfather was white, and his grandmother was, they're listed in the 1850 census as, she's listed as mulatto. So they did make a distinction between black and I guess mixed.
Right.
And I found it very interesting. I did a whole lot of research on the family from outside of Stafford, Virginia. And in 1875, interracial marriages were legal in Washington, D.C. So he took her to Washington, D.C., and they got married. I have a copy of the marriage license. And then he took her back to Virginia. No problem.
Oh, really? Good.
But when I look at the map, it looks like the county courthouse and the municipal buildings are on what used to be Greenhouse property. So I don't know if that was the reason why it was more tolerated. But I thought it was interesting. And what, 1965, the interracial couple went through there and were arrested.
Right. That's a famous story.
Yes, that was portrayed in the recent film Loving.
Yeah.
Yes, that was their last name. That was very
Yeah.
ironic.
Yeah.
Their last name was Love.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I said, well, my great-grandparents were married and nobody put them in jail.
Has any of this history ended up in any of your poems? Have you written about it?
No, about the closest you're going to get is Gone with the Wind, and that's about the book Gone with the Wind, which made me angry. But no, the history doesn't end up in the poems.
Do you have that poem with you?
Yes, I do have it.
Would you like to read it?
I would like to read it.